In this video, I'm going to explain two important liquidity ratios that may be relevant to most businesses. These ratios are the current ratio and the quick ratio. However, before I explain the calculation of these two ratios and how do we interpret the results, it is important to know that why short-term liquidity is of importance to a business. We need to understand that although profitability may be an important goal for a business, but profit is not sufficient on its own to guarantee survival. There must be sufficient liquid assets available to ensure that short-term commitments can be met. Otherwise, the company could be forced into liquidation. In simple words, your company's liquidity shows how well you can pay off your current debt using your current assets. The example of current assets may include cash, accounts receivable, and inventory, while current liabilities may include accounts payable, proposed dividend, and short-term loans. When you compare current assets to your current liabilities, you want to strike a balance. Too much liquidity means you have more room for investment back into your business. Too little liquidity can leave you unable to handle your liabilities. In order to calculate the current ratio and the quick assets ratio, we will use the following numbers from the accounts of Alpha Company. As you can see, the inventory is $30,000, accounts receivable are $62,500, while cash at bank is of $7,000. The sum total of these current assets is $99,500. The current liabilities include accounts payable of $37,875 and proposed dividend of $20,000. The total of current liabilities is $57,875. Now I will use these numbers to calculate the current ratio and the quick assets ratio of Alpha Company, and then I will interpret the results. So watch carefully. First, we calculate the current ratio. That is simply the ratio of current assets to current liabilities. In the case of Alpha Company, the current assets are $99,500, while the current liabilities are $57,875. So when we divide current assets with current liabilities, we get a current ratio of 1.7 to 1 as demonstrated in the formula. This implies that for each dollar of current liabilities, Alpha Company has $1.70 of current assets available. Notice that this figure is usually expressed as a ratio rather than as a percentage. Let me explain the implications of the current ratio. The current ratio is a measure of the company's ability to meet its short-term debts. This is important because the company could run out of cash and be forced into liquidation even if it was making profits. Working capital has to be managed very carefully. The company must invest enough money in working capital to enable it to conduct its business and meet its day-to-day obligations to suppliers and employees. It cannot, however, afford to invest too much in unproductive current assets. Doing so might leave the directors open to allegations of inefficiency. This could trigger off a takeover bid. It is sometimes suggested that the optimal current ratio is 2:1. Experience has shown that most businesses need current assets worth roughly twice current liabilities. More is usually regarded as excessive. This guideline must, however, be treated carefully. Some businesses do not need as high a current ratio. The classic example being a food retailer whose stocks are usually sold within days or even hours of them being put on the shelves and whose customers pay immediately in cash. Such a business could survive quite easily on a current ratio which is very much lower than 2:1. At the other extreme, a business which had erratic cash receipts might require a very much higher current ratio. Alpha's current ratio seems rather low. It would, however, be worth looking at previous year's figures. If the company has always managed to survive on a ratio of 1.7 to 1 or thereabouts, then there is probably little to worry about. Conversely, if the ratio is falling, then this might indicate that the company is running into liquidity problems. The second important liquidity ratio is the quick assets ratio, also called asset test ratio. The quick assets ratio is a rather more stringent measure of liquidity than the current ratio. It is the ratio of quick assets, that is current assets excluding inventory, to current liabilities. The underlying assumption is that cash and accounts receivables are more liquid assets than the inventory that will be difficult to convert into cash in case of an emergency. This is because inventory may be first sold on credit and converted into accounts receivable, and then the accounts receivable will be converted into cash. The calculation of quick assets ratio is shown in this slide, and it is calculated as 1.2 to 1, implying that for each dollar of current liabilities, the Alpha company has quick assets of $1.20. By ignoring inventory, the ratio concentrates on those current assets which are immediately available to pay the creditors as and when they fall due. It is often suggested that the optimal quick assets ratio is 1:1. Again, this is subject to the nature of the business. A retailer will survive quite happily on a ratio of only 0.3:1. Some businesses need a much higher ratio. Alpha's ratio of 1.2 to 1 seems surprisingly high given the doubts voiced earlier about the adequacy of the current ratio. It would appear that the company does not hold much in the way of inventory. This will tend to drive the current ratio down without having any adverse effect on the quick assets ratio. If you have liked this video, please subscribe to my channel for future updates. Also share and like this video. Thank you for watching.